Hello. I was just saying to my team, will I ever not look surprised when that screen unveils me? I don't think so. So let's see what it looks like on day 30. But welcome to day 3 of the Inspiring Workplaces Summer Series. It's great to have you here. We've had 2 fantastic days, different content, different topics, and that variety is going to keep coming, different insights and learning for you for free for weeks to come. If you do miss anything, we will be on demand. You could be watching me on demand right now. Hello. So please keep coming back to the Inspiring Workplaces website where you can view the content for weeks and months to come. As discussed yesterday, we will be bringing live music into the summer series. We'll try to get at least 1 concert a week throughout July and August. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And if you do know like-minded people, inspirers like yourself, who want to change the world through the world of work, please share this content with them and get them coming to the live sessions too. And it's free. But to today's speaker, I've known her for a long time. She spoke for us in Chicago back in 2018, just having launched her first book, bestseller. She's just launched another book, which she's touching on shortly. Been in HR for years. She strives to improve the world of work and challenge convention, a quintessential inspirer for us, I think. And she's here to talk about how to bring out your values during the pandemic and beyond. So please welcome Debra Corrie. Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Yes, it's been my absolute pleasure. And I didn't realize I'm number 3. I'm a firm believer in the power of 3. So awesome. I was honored to be in the sessions, and now I'm even more honored that it's the 3rd one.
Fantastic. Well, without further ado, I'm going to leave it to you, Debra, to take us through your talk, and I'll be back for questions later.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to get started here. And I'm so excited to be here today to talk to all of you about values and how to bring your values out to play both during and after the crisis. I am a big believer in storytelling. I'm going to share lots of stories with you today. And I'm also a big believer in pictures. I think there's, what's that expression? A picture's worth 1,000 words. And I try to pick pictures on my slides that are meaningful, impactful, and will help get my point across. And I think this first picture on my cover slide really does that a couple different ways. First of all, this whole concept of being on this tightrope. I'm sure that most of us feel like we're living on a tightrope right now, just trying to balance and get everything done. And in respect to values, this whole concept of not just juggling the work that we do, but juggling the work we do using our values, playing with our values, living our values, everything that we can do about values. So yeah, I love this picture. So what am I going to be covering in the next 20-25 minutes? I want to first answer the question about why are values important, like to start with the basics there, then move on to how can you unlock your values and bring them out to play. I'm going to use this term out to play quite a bit. And that's because that's actually the name of my book, Bringing Your Values Out to Play. And I love that term, that concept. It's all about using them throughout your whole employee experience in running your business. Then I'm going to be a storyteller, and I'm going to share some stories on how companies are bringing their values out to play. And then I want to make sure I leave you with as much practical tips that you can get. So I'm going to jam a couple more tips in at the end. So why are company values important? It's interesting. So when I wrote my book, I answered this question. It was the first thing in the first chapter that I answered. But what I want to do is I want to share a couple reasons from my book, but also how I've seen values play a different role throughout the pandemic and hopefully going forward as well. So 4 reasons. The first one, and this is the obvious one, isn't it? This is that values help you achieve your mission. We all have this mission and purpose, and our values are on that jet taking us up to our mission and purpose. And the reason is because our values help guide our business, our values help guide our people in making decisions and actions. So if you look at this picture, again, I think it's really powerful. Our employees constantly are standing in a fork in a road, and they need to decide which direction to go, what decisions to make. And that's really the role of values, is to help our employees figure out which direction to go in. But in the pandemic, if you go back to that picture, left and right didn't work, did it? We all had to come up with new ways, new things to do throughout this pandemic. So what I've seen happen with values is they also really have been helping our businesses and our employees really pivot and flex and sort of move in different directions during these challenging times. And I'm going to give you an example of it, and this is a personal example. So this lovely picture are my company values. I've got two values. First one is opening the door to possibilities, and the second one is create magic. And when we went into the pandemic, I had my whole year planned. You know, I have this new book. I'm traveling the world. I'm going to be doing talks. I'm going to do workshops. I'm going to, you know, really open the door to possibilities and create magic through this. And then the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden I had to figure out what in the world was I going to do? How was I going to do this? So I looked at my values and they helped me. They truly helped me figure out how I could pivot. So I'm doing things like this. I'm doing, you know, webinar, hopefully opening the door to possibilities for you and helping you. My husband's a developer. He's helping me create an app so that instead of me having to physically be there to help people with values, there's an app. So they really have helped me on course and figure out which direction to go. And related to that, what I've also seen values do is to give a little bit of certainty and a little bit of comfort in these times of crisis. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much fear. There's so much of the unknown. We need something to help us. And I love this picture. It's so cute. Matt, you'll like this picture since you're getting a new puppy. It's this puppy that's just wrapped in this blanket. And that's how I see values as helping organizations and helping people give us that comfort. So I'd really love for you to think about those 4 whys that I just mentioned and think about how is this working in your organization? How are you using values in these ways? And speaking of the how, the next thing I wanted to do was to talk a little bit about how you can unlock your values and bring them out to play. And I've got 3 ways that I'd like to share with you. Oops, went too fast there. First one, and this is very obvious, is to make sure that your employees know what your values are. And although it's obvious, this statistic comes from a Reward Gateway study, and it said that only 32% of employees actually feel informed about their values. Now, there's a statistic from Gallup that says only 27% know. So either of those numbers are not good. So even though it seems very obvious, the first thing that we should do is to make sure that every single employee knows our values. And I took these pictures from my book, and this is how times have changed. So these are pictures that I put in the book to show how companies are sharing their values. None of these are going to work right now. So the one on the top left is a company in Boston, and they had this beautiful values wall that all of your employees walk by on the way to work every day. The one on the right is a company in the UK, and they have values pillows. I love that. And then the bottom left is a company that has values recognition trophies. So again, great things that they're doing, but it's not going to work right now. So we need to think about when people are either in lockdown or working different shifts, what are we going to do to make our employees actually know what the values are? But obviously, that's not enough. It's great to know what they are, but even more important, I'm not concerned about people memorizing things. I want them to know what they mean so that when they're standing in that fork in the road, they know what they mean enough to help them with the direction. But again, bad news. This is actually why I wrote my book, to be honest with you, when I read these reports. This one comes from Gallup, and it says that only 23% of people strongly agree that they can apply their values. So that means the rest of the people are standing there in that fork in the road, completely lost, having no clue where to go. So it's really important. And let me give you if I was out there with you, sitting face to face, working with you and your team, let me give you my 3-step approach. And by all means, use this with your team. What I normally would do is I would do focus groups or workshops, and I would have us workshop these 3 questions. First of all, what does the value mean to the company? So if you've got a value like, I don't know, speak up, it was one of the values at my last company. What does speak up mean at the company level? Then the next question to talk about is, what does the value mean at the team level? So I'm in human resources. What does speak up mean for our HR team? And then the last thing, and a lot of people don't do this, and it's really important, is what does that value mean to me personally? So as I'm doing my job and I'm making decisions, what does that value mean? So I really encourage you to do those types of exercises, either formally and informally, so that everybody can answer those 3 questions. And then the last thing is to weave your values into everything you do. You can call it embedding, plumbing, weaving, whatever you want to call it. Make sure that your values are prominent everywhere throughout the employee experience. In my book, what I do is I map out all the aspects of the employee experience. So how can you use them when you recruit? How can you use them when you onboard? So on and so on and so on. They should be seen everywhere. And the reason that it's so important, and it's just another why, is so that your values become a part of your muscle memory. My teenage son taught me this term. It's something to do with gaming, so that you don't even have to think. It just happens. And that's what you want your employees to do. You want it to become a part of their muscle memory so that they pull it out. And reason I have this silly picture is to remind me to tell you a story that has nothing to do with values, but muscle memory. So I was a gymnast. If you saw me, you would know that. I'm all of 5 feet tall. I was a competitive gymnast, and probably about, 5-10 years after I finished competing, I was riding my bike one day and I got hit by a car. And as I was flying through the air off of my bike, my muscle memory from gymnastics took over, and I did 2 things. The first thing I did was I went into a tuck. That's what you do when you're flying through the air as a gymnast. You tuck your legs into your chest and you do a tuck. And then the second thing I did was I actually did the Olympic stand. You know, when you see a gymnast and they do that arms up and they do that beautiful stand and the crowd cheers, I did an Olympic stand, which was probably very scary for the driver of the bike. And the people who were watching me, they looked at me like, should we applaud? Should we cry? What should we do? But the point of that silly story, which hopefully you'll remember, is that you want your values to be a part of the muscle memory. So when your employees are flying through the air, trying to make decisions, they make the right decisions for themselves and the right decisions for the business. Okay, so enough stories about me. What I wanted to do in this section is to share with you some stories of how companies are bringing their values out to play. And what I did is I'm not sharing any of my normal stories that are in the book, okay? Instead, what I wanted to share with you are some stories of what companies have been doing throughout the pandemic. And actually, interestingly enough, I was just mentioning to Matt that I've decided to actually add a new chapter to my book, which is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. What are companies doing throughout the pandemic, living their values? And the good news is I'm going to turn it into ebook and give you that last chapter for free to really help as many people as possible. But for today, let me share just a couple stories. And I've got some stories that talk about how they've used their values for others, so the community. And then I've got a couple stories which are how they've used their values for their people. All right. So I'm going to look at my notes and make sure I get this right. So the first one is a company in the UK called Brewdog, and they make beer. And one of their values that they have is that they want to show that business can be a force for good. And they really, really pulled this value out in a lot of things that they've done for their community. One of the things that they did is they switched from making beer to making hand sanitizer. And I know that other distilleries did the same thing. And it's such a lovely example of seeing a problem, living through your values, and doing something to help them. And I actually just interviewed them this week because I'm going to write a little bit more about what they've done. And they've done so much more than the hand sanitizer. They've done things like they created hero packs to give out to healthcare workers. They donated some profits. They supplied water at no cost to people in Ohio, to a certain community. They volunteered their truck drivers to help. And the list goes on of things that they've done just by living that specific value. Next example is Cliff Bars. Makes me hungry just looking at this picture. And they pledged $7 million worth of their different types of bars to donate, again, to people who need it, to food banks, to first responders, to healthcare workers, all of those types of things. And they really did through their value, because if you look at their values, which they don't call values, they call them aspirations, they all start with the word sustaining. And it talks about this concept of sustaining their communities and making a difference where they work, source, and play. And that's exactly what they've done by donating their bars. This next example, and I literally just added this slide 10 minutes ago because I just interviewed them today. And they are a company that does online education for teachers. Well, normally they do education for teachers. And one of their values is do the right thing. And when I interviewed them, they said that during the pandemic, and they realized, like all of us, that teacher is a different thing now. All of a sudden, parents are going to have to be teachers. And they quickly pivoted and flexed and created a separate home learning hub for parents, which is absolutely amazing. It's free. They changed their products. They made it so that it would help parents. And again, I think it's a really lovely example of doing something, living through that value. And then the last example in this category is Atlassian. Atlassian's an Australian global technology company. Excuse me. And this example sort of pulls together what they did for the community and for their people. And what they did is they saw a lot of small businesses struggling. You know, they were closed, they weren't able to make any money. So they came up with this idea of having an online auction for their employees. And they went to these local businesses and they said, give us a promise for the future. And then people can bid on them. So you could bid, I don't know, on a restaurant. You can see cookies in the corner there, other shops. And then the employees would donate. So it was a win for the employees because they got these lovely things to look forward to. And it was a win for the small businesses. And then the great thing about it also is that Atlassian, what they did is they matched the donations and they contributed even more. As far as direct link to their values, one of their 5 values is be the change that you seek. And it talks about having the courage and resourcefulness to spark change. And that's exactly what they did through doing this. So how about for their people? What types of things have people done for their employees through living their values? And again, this is a very new one. I just interviewed this company, I think, yesterday afternoon. And one of the things that they told me that they did was they ran a Make Everyone Smile activity. So don't know if you've ever done Secret Santa before, where you all get someone's name and then you get like $5 to spend on a gift. That's exactly what they did. They all had this very small budget. So it wasn't about, you know, the quantity. It was more about the thought. And then they sent it to each other as a way to make everyone smile. Now, one of their values is we are experts in support. And one aspect, one of the behaviors is that we cheer each other on. We pick each other up when we fall. And I think this is a lovely example of doing that, which is a great segue into the next one. So the next one is an online retail company called Misguided. And they did something similarly to make their employees smile and to help each other and support each other. And I know other companies have done this as well. And on their communications portal, every Monday, they would have a Happy Monday page. And people would submit lovely positive stories of either what they did, what was happening in their world, or what they were seeing around them. And again, it was a way really to support each other. And when I interviewed him, he said that it was updates on anything from charity donations to working from home to pup dates, new puppies, new babies, anything to really inspire and spread a little bit of happiness. And this links very closely to 2 of their values. One of their values is love lots, and another value is win together. So really bringing this to life. The next one is from my previous company, Reward Gateway. And one of their values is we are human, which talks about understanding that everyone has a career and a different personal life to juggle, which is very important during these challenging times right now, and to use empathy and understanding in supporting each other. So with that in mind, what they did is they designed a couple new recognition e-cards. I'm sure many of you do e-cards. Great way, especially when people have been in lockdown, to be able to thank people. And they created, these are just 2 of them. So you make working from home a better place to work, and distance makes the heart grow fonder. So again, a really great way to do that. And then the last one, sorry, more food on this one. This is a company in the Netherlands, Tony's Chocolonely, absolutely gorgeous chocolate. And one of the things that they did, and this sort of goes back to what Atlassian did, is they wanted to do something to help their employees, but they also wanted to do something to support the local businesses. So a couple times throughout lockdown, what they did is they put together these food boxes, and they would go to the local businesses and they would send them a box. So this is I asked them, can you send me a picture of it? So this was the menu they had on this one: eggplant salad, white asparagus, so on and so on. It looks like a really nice gift box and something fun to get on your doorstep. And how this links is similarly, I've got a bunch of companies that talk about smiling in their values. They have a value which is makes you smile. And it means something a little bit different for them. It's about looking on the bright side and looking for the good in people, to keep laughing, and to, I love this part, being full of energy to move chocolate mountains. Only a chocolate company would have that value. So again, I've shared, I think, somewhere around 8, 9 examples here. And I think they all do the same thing. They don't directly link possibly with their values, but they all indirectly do the whole sentiment behind what the values are. So let me share with you just a few final tips just to help you, again, to help you as you bring your values out to play. First one, and again, this might seem obvious, make sure you have the right values. Now, it was important before the pandemic to have the right values, but I think it makes sense as we get a little bit further down the line here is to take a step back and really assess whether your values that you have now, either values or values and behaviors, are right to take you forward. If your business has changed, the employee experience has changed, is there anything that you need to do to make sure you have the right ones? Because again, they're going to help people make decisions and actually drive your mission. The next one is to go out and shout about your values, okay? I read a statistic, I really need to write this down, something like that by the end of my session, you will have forgotten 50, 60% of what I've said. By the end of the day, you will forget something like 70, 80% of what I've said. And by the end of the week, you will have forgotten 90% of what I said. So you need to make sure that you shout about them over and over again so that your employees are going to have an opportunity to absorb them. And you're really helping them by doing this so that you can explain it to them in different ways so it can resonate and mean something to them. And then last but not least, make your decisions based off of your values in good times and bad. And that's really what I wanted to show through the stories, that even when times are tough, it's almost more important to bring your values out because that is going to have a lasting memory for your employees, for your customers, and for the world as to what your values really mean. So my last plea is if anybody has a good story that you want to share with me, drop me a line. You can be in my book, no pressure, but if you have one, I'd love to be able to put you under the spotlight. So that's it for me. I want to thank you all for your time. And I guess we can do questions now, Anne.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Just saying, I'm trying to, if anybody doesn't know, I'm trying to get my wedding reorganized. It's cancelled for this year. Like life plans, Debra was mentioning, straight up out the window. Trying to elope now, not do overseas, but long story short, I'm trying to squeeze into clothes I just don't fit into right now. And after that presentation, I want a Brewdog beer, chocolate. So that might be put on the back burner. But no, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. You know, we had another speaker at the beginning of the week talking around just, you know, doing the right thing, doing what your mum taught you. And I think it just comes back to these simple human values that trying to do the right thing. I love the misguided stuff too. But we do have some questions from the audience. So James Dalton asked, in your expertise, it's on the screen if you can see it, how does a business balance the real lived-in business cultures versus the aspirations of the business when creating company values?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And actually, when I talk about how you discover your values, and I consciously use the word discover and not develop, because I truly believe that your values are part of who you are. I wrote a blog years ago saying that's part of your DNA. One of the things that we should be doing is looking at what do we need now to help our business? But James, exactly as you said, where do you want to be in the future? And we should always have an eye on the future, because although I said make sure that your values are right, I'm not a big fan of changing your values all the time. I think it's very confusing to your employees. So if you can get that balance of what do you need now and what do you need for your future, I think that's good. What evolves more often over time are behaviors. So as your business grows, your behaviors might change, but the values don't change unless there's something monumentally wrong. But no, really good point, James. Thank you.
And I think James has a follow-up saying, should values be verbs?
Do you know, it's really funny because I mentioned that I'm creating this app with my husband, and we're getting into a big debate about, because they're originally I was going to create these value cards. I love cards, and everybody would deal the cards out, and I was going to put values on the cards, and I'm like, I just don't know what the right answer is, because personally I like verbs. I think verbs are good, but there's some beautiful values out there that are not verbs. So to me, I'm not hung up as long as they're the right words. Obviously, behaviors have to be verbs because they have to be actions. But the funny thing is, though, a lot of people turn values into verbs anyway. In my last book, I have a company in Australia where this is going to be rude. Am I allowed to swear on this, Matt?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is it okay? Okay. So this Australian company has a value that says, don't be a head. You can fill in the blanks there. Now, that's not a verb, but it's one of the most powerful values that I've ever heard, because people start almost using it as a verb in conversations when people are acting that way. So as long as it, does what you need, there is no right or wrong answer. Now, James, I might differ from other people. I know some people are like, it has to be a verb. I'm a bit more flexible as long as it's right.
And where do you, we have another question coming, but I'll sneak one in on my own. But where do you stand on having values that are both are the same, both for external consumption and internal consumption? Because some people like to have two sets, whereas I think personally they should be able to be communicated both internally and externally, the same set.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I've seen it a couple of different ways. Personally, I think that it has different definitions, possibly. So you might have a value of speak up. I just keep picking that one. And it might, speak up might mean one thing inside the company, but then also as an organization, speak up might mean actually we as a company want to really fight for the things that we think are important. So I do think it should be both. And interesting, I'm helping a company right now develop their behaviors, and it's a company that has members, and we're having the members be a part of developing the behaviors because we want to make sure that we hear their voice. So, and I've heard companies do that before. A company in Australia I interviewed for my book, they brought their customers in when they developed their values because they wanted to hear what they needed. So
I think that's great. And Russell just sent in a question on the screen now. How do you address when an organization's employees and leaders do not practice the espoused values, not practicing what they preach?
Do you know what? That's why it's interesting, because in my book, the shortest chapter I have is on leading from the top. And the reason that it's short is because basically I only wanted it to be one sentence, which is just do it, because it's never going to work if leaders don't do it. So I think leaders need to be an integral part of discovering your values so that they have ownership and buy-in. And if you don't have that ownership and buy-in, I think it's important to understand why. I'm always a big fan of making sure that if a leader doesn't support you, understanding the reasons behind it. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they have a different meaning, but absolutely, Russell, you need to. The only way to address it is to get over it, because if not, it's.
Surely you'd have to hire, if your startup is different, hopefully you're creating values that you believe in yourself, but you have to hire leaders against values of the business, because if you don't, as Russell says, back them up with your own behavior, then they're going to fail.
Absolutely. And that's why it's the first thing you need to do is hire. And also we need to be brave. And I've said this a couple times throughout my book, and I always say it, which is if a leader is not living them, then they need to leave. And do you know what? It's not a horrible thing to do, because if you work in a company where you don't believe in the values, it's not good for you anyway. So the best thing to do is to part ways in a nice way, in a respectful way, and just say, maybe it's not the right company for you.
Absolutely. I think Steph over in Chicago has got a question for us as well. Says she remembers you from Chicago, I think. What objections have you received in sharing the thinking about values, and how have you overcome them?
Steph, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more. When you say what objections, what do you mean? Is that within your company?
Or maybe yourself, when your own personal thinking about values, have you had pushback on trying to communicate these internally?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be pushback. There's always going to be times where people are not going to believe in them. And again, it's either one thing or another. They just fundamentally don't believe in them, or they might not understand them. And that's why the suggestion that I said before about making sure that people understand what the value means to them personally. So a lot of times when I do these workshops, people start the conversation thinking, oh, I don't believe in this. Like, speak up. Why do I need to speak up? I'm a call center person. I'm answering the phone all day. This is the silliest value I've ever heard. But actually, when you start talking to that person, you realize, actually, if you don't speak up and tell us what the challenges that you're having with customers, so if our processes aren't working for you, our systems aren't working, you need to speak up and tell us that, because we don't know it. So to me, I like to get it over these objectives and just have a good old honest conversation. So I do remember the Chicago one. I wanted to tell you, at the end of the Chicago one, I went and did a flying trapeze afterwards. So I need to go. If you live in Chicago, it's a blast. Go do it.
Oh yeah, well, I'm desperate to get out of my house and get to Chicago too. Like I said, I love the misguided piece around wanting to inspire and make their colleagues smile. I think we want to inspire all our community and make you smile too. I think your story about the Olympic double twist off with the perfect plants was, I just wish YouTube has captured that, but that made me smile today, and you've brought us a lot of information to go and take back into our business as well. So thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you to everybody who's given us great questions and joined us. This will be on demand from tomorrow, and we'll be back again as we are every day with a new speaker and some new content. So thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.